The start of the new decade was marked by an onslaught of problematic champions, most if not all of whom were subject to balance changes after balance changes in an effort to amend all the issues they caused. The champion would either be too gimmicky or inconsistent, resulting in staggered play rates almost immediately after release like Rel, Neela, and Renata Glass, or they would be the cause of nightmares for a majority of players. Viego, Gwen, Akshan, Zeri, Belvet, Samira, Cassante, what have you. Realizing they may have been a bit too cavalier with the champion designs, for 2023 onwards, Riot wanted to pull things back a bit and focus more on champion experience, as opposed to compressing as many mechanics into one character as they could. And from an objective standpoint, apart from maybe Smolder, the other 5 champions released during this time have been fairly inoffensive. Even Smolder, you could argue, is nowhere near as destructive as the 200 Years crew from seasons 10 through 12. One champion in particular that people were initially nervous about was Naafiri, who would be the first dedicated AD assassin to come out since Qiyana roughly 4 years ago to the date. Despite the archetype known for being frustrating to play against, Naafiri's presence has been rather tame in the year or so she's been out for, borderlining obscure in roughly every elo. Granted, it's only been a year since her release, but compared to her other contemporaries, Naafiri is without a doubt the least popular champion out of the ones that have come out over the past 2 years. She's even less popular than Milio, who is for all intents and purposes a very niche enchanter, and Briar, who is one of the most unintuitive playstyles in the game. How did she not click as well as other assassins? For today's episode of No One Plaays, we'll be discussing Naafiri. AD assassins are distinct from AP assassins in that they're afforded an entire class of items meant specifically for them. Subsequently, that entails a range of privileges that their magic damage counterparts may not have access to, and over the years it's only grown more and more pronounced. Having your own dedicated arsenal of weaponry makes it so you can have bonuses tailor-made to your win condition without fear of other classes taking advantage of it, at least in theory. For example, it would be risky if not impossible to create an assassin item strictly for AP champions, as that would also give the mage archetype an opportunity to exploit it, which may be the reason why there's no AP Serpent's Fang, for example. Riot would have to balance it not just for Katarina, Akali, Echo and such, but also for all 3 subclasses of the mage archetype, and as you know, mages can easily apply the shield break debuff to multiple members, whereas assassins typically focus on just one person, keeping their item abuse from going too far off balance. Back to AD champions, Zed, Talon, Qiyana, Kha'Zix, Rengar, and so on have consistently been difficult to keep in check because not only are they given a curated set of items, but ironically they can also take advantage of AD fighter items as well, naturally making the class prone to spiraling out of control. You would think Naafiri has the same benefits, perhaps even more so. Though ultimately an AD assassin through and through, Naafiri's playstyle contrasts from her peers in a way that ostensibly appears to circumvent the usual weaknesses of an assassin, although we'll soon find out later that in doing so it ends up creating more issues in the process. A distinguishing trait with Naafiri, and one that's shared with Zed, is that unlike most assassins, she actually has the neutral game. Through darkened daggers and her packmates, Naafiri is able to farm and harass with a reasonable margin for safety, especially for a member of her class. Her Q can be fired twice, with even a single cast dealing a fair bit of damage. As an AoE projectile that suffers no loss of damage on subsequent targets, Naafiri can attack you in neutral while simultaneously pushing the wave, forcing her lane opponents to be wary of their positioning even when behind minions. The packmates themselves can also aid in chip damage and wave clear at minimal exposure to herself, and to add further icing on the cake, successive applications of her Q results in a measurable heal for Naafiri. Right away, Darkened Daggers has all the makings of an excellent ability that can easily abuse a wide range of items. And for a time it did. The penetrating skill shot made her an excellent abuser of the Mythic era version of Ravenous Hydra, just like it did with Zed, giving her near uncontestable wave clear and AoE damage. She was also a great user of Eclipse thanks to her packmates applying that second instance of damage immediately upon landing a single Q, allowing her to shrug off any attempts to counterattack her in neutral. And though Naafiri wasn't going to be outspacing mages, with a target range of 900 on her Q, if she didn't want to confront you, she could spend the entire laning phase in relative comfort. I personally was most concerned about Darkened Daggers when I first saw her, as I believe giving assassins a neutral game would be equivalent to giving marksmen Tryndamere's ultimate. The class is legendary for their advantage state, and in some cases disadvantage as well. A strong neutral game would imply they have no weakness. On the subject of advantage, the second trait that set off an alarm for Naafiri is her uncharacteristically easy to understand gameplay. Hound's Pursuit and Eviscerate are both very simple abilities that lead to one another with predictable effects. Her W is a straightforward log-on dash, sending her and all packmates towards her target of interest. Though it can be body blocked by another champion or cancelled before she lunges forward, at its core it's a point-and-click dash, meaning guaranteed damage. Eviscerate may not be a point-and-click, but once again it's a brief dash forward that damages on impact, not too dissimilar from Kane's Q. Essentially, a typical Naafiri combo would be to open with W, then upon getting close you with E. Provided outside forces don't intervene, Naafiri's combo is arguably the easiest to land out of any AD assassin. It also happens to be the easiest to respond to, leading us to the first reason why people might prefer to play someone else over her. Despite all points leading her to being labeled an assassin, Naafiri's actual playstyle comes off more like a diver, but at the same time she doesn't have that same hard engage potential. The point of an assassin is to hit you hard and fast or hard and evasively. Naafiri fails to achieve either outcome. Take someone like Kha'Zix. The moment you see him engage on you, if you can even see him at all, you have about half a second to brace for certain death or to mount a resistance. Against Rengar, it's the same thing. As soon as your FOB turns dark, your screen can turn gray in the blink of an eye. On the other hand, assassins like Zed and Akali may have a delay in their rotation, but during that entire time you'd be lucky if you can land even a strike against them, or run away from them for that matter. Not to mention the very attacks they used to finish you off are the same ones they used to run away. The Naafiri's Hound's Pursuit has among the longest dash ranges of any basic ability in addition to being point and click. The 3/4 of a second channel time that takes place prior makes her engage way too telegraphed and predictable, giving any and all opponents more than adequate time to figure out what they're gonna do. Obviously, they don't have an easy defensive option or counter, then in that regard Naafiri's engage is even stupider than Rengar's, but if there is something, it's practically guaranteed to go off beforehand. Now how is Naafiri's delayed engage any different from Rengar's ultimate giving you a heads up that he's nearby? It's because Naafiri is completely visible and targetable during that time. She cannot rely on any element of surprise to assault you. Even if you're fully aware that Rengar, Kha'Zix, or any other assassin might be lurking around the corner, the one thing you can't predict is when they're gonna go in, especially in the chaos of a skirmish or teamfight. The time between a Rengar or Kha'Zix jumping onto you and making contact is about 1/3 of a second. That would be hard to react to consistently even if all your attention was trained on them, let alone when you're distracted by other enemy champions at the same time. But with Naafiri, even if your attention is split between her and someone else, you still have plenty of time to realize that she's about to jump onto you. That extra buffer window assures that a Gragas can time Body Slam to interrupt her dash, a Zera to launch a shocking orb at her, a Fiora to use her pulse, an Aurelia to use Divine Dance, an Ahri to use Charm, a Draven to use Stand Aside. Heck, even Sylas has enough time to use the initial dash of his E, and then throw out his chains to interrupt Naafiri before she gets to go in. Unlike other delayed activation abilities like Zed's Haymaker, Naafiri has no way to set up her W to be reacted to. It's simply too easy to respond to her main dash tool, which happens to be her only real way to stick onto targets. One other reason why assassins are so tough to deal with is that they can engage on you and then keep engaging on you even if you try to run away. Zed has 2 mid-range gap closers, Yone has 3, with ramping movement speed I might add. Rengar can jump onto you endlessly provided you're near a brush. Kha'Zix can go invisible and get a boost of speed twice or thrice depending on if it's evolved. Alternatively, they might have some way to keep you pinned down so as not to be able to put much distance between you and them. Rengar can root you with an empowered bullet strike. Kha'Zix can slow you hard with evolved spike racks. Qiyana can CC chain you with her ultimate and river Q, so on and so forth. Naafiri's W may come with a 1/4 second 99% slow, but if her target dashes or uses an ability to stop her temporarily, then run away. Eviscerate alone isn't sufficient enough to keep her on her target. Lacking either speed or stealth to guard against enemy response, Naafiri is one of the most polarizing assassins to play where she either destroys the enemy team harder than any assassin in the game, or she feels like the most worthless assassin in the game. This of course makes it challenging to play her outside of counter situations wherein the enemy team consists of champions who lack defensive or disengaged tools or they have a poor disadvantage state. However, against those champions, anyone would work, not just her. Naafiri's other problem is that, like I mentioned earlier, she doesn't have an easy way to get out when she does get in, which is why I feel like you have to think of her more as a diver than an actual assassin. Someone who goes in and tries to do as much DPS as possible before they eventually explode themselves. Call of the Pack offers a tremendous boost in speed upon activation that refreshes both the shield and speed boost upon takedown, but defensively it's a far cry from being able to instantly extricate yourself from the situation. Combine that with how long it takes for her to actually pull off her combo, and there aren't many situations where she can get in, kill someone to get out without the enemy team being aware of it. Ironically, the inverse is also just as problematic. Many assassins have equally as good of a disadvantage state as they do advantage, making it onerous to take them down without proper lockdown. The self-same abilities they use to engage on their target of interest can also be used to run away. Naafiri is one of very few exceptions to this. If she gets engaged on, the only thing she can do is put a tiny bit of distance between her and her attacker with Eviscerate, then use ultimate to get the move speed. If she has Serildus, then maybe she can use her Q to slow her target down in the meantime, but the point still stands. She's arguably the least equipped to handle situations where she is the target. To be fair, those weaknesses are intentional. If she were to have the same rushdown, stick potential, and disengage, she would quite literally have no weakness, because she has what most other assassins don't, neutral. But therein lies the reason why she fell off so hard after being released. It was clear that most of Naafiri's pressure came from how safely you can play her in lane before she transitioned into the mid to late game and could reliably start hunting people down. Moreover, it was also apparent that her straightforward gameplay made her prone to being a stat checker at times, especially against team comps who had no way to stop her dash. She wasn't overloaded per se, but she was certainly overtuned. A hotfix came shortly after she was released, nerfing the base values on all of her abilities and even the scaling as well. Then in 13.16 they nerfed her base stats even more. While that certainly helped in giving her opponents a more lenient margin for error, it still didn't address the fact that she could spend the entirety of laning phase being quite frankly an infinitely better version of York. So what they tried to do next in 13.17 was diminish the impact of her neutral game by lowering the base damage, bonus AD ratio, and healing of Dark Daggers. That way she couldn't just be a poke mage in lane who can endlessly heal herself over and over. But then again, that was literally the only thing setting her apart from other assassins. She has an objectively weaker advantage and disadvantage state, which was done so to counterbalance the fact that she has a better neutral game than most other assassins. She still does, don't get me wrong, but the gap has been narrowed down sufficiently to the point where her neutral game doesn't stand head and shoulders above her peers, and with that, her deficiencies became more obvious. Overall, Naafiri's drop-off in play rate is, and I can't believe I'm saying this as a negative, because she's too fair to be an assassin. Assassins by nature are not meant to be fair, they're meant to take cheap shots and be hard to hit. That's the whole principle of the class and why they're the most disliked champions in the game. If they were to fight you in an honorable head-on confrontation, by definition that would not make them an assassin, that would just make them a fighter. Naafiri is an assassin with the code of honor of a fighter. She doesn't really take cheap shots, unless of course you count her dogs playing Secret Service as cheap, which I mean I do. When she engages, she gives ample notice that she's engaging. When she's all-inning, she gives a clear signal that she's all-inning, and when she attacks you, she doesn't deprive you of any option to stop her. She doesn't stun you in place to guarantee all her damage, she doesn't go invisible to prevent you from clicking on her, she doesn't have on-target ability to dodge any of your counterattacks, and a huge part of her DPS is tied to a skill shot that's extremely hard to land twice in a row until you get Cyril does. On that note, I understand a lot of her concerns can be addressed by purchasing items like Edge of Night to make her dash harder to stop, or like I just pointed out with Cyrilda's, making it easier to land her daggers. But items are universal, all assassins get the same benefits as she does. Naafiri doesn't get any more of an advantage from a certain item than other assassins. Ultimately, she's a fish out of water. I feel like the Darkin race in general is ill-suited to be an assassin. They're founded on relentless attack, continuous uptime, and train tanking, not burst-oriented attack patterns. When you think of Rost and Aatrox, they're all about dealing big damage in a wide area, draining the life out of their victims, and using it to fuel their rampage. When I think of Naafiri's packmates as a concept, I think of Twice from My Hero Academia, endlessly spawning more and more packmates that overwhelm everything through sheer numbers, growing more and more in number with every kill, and feasting on their corpses like a pack of ravenous wolves. That's a fantasy I had with Naafiri, not really someone who throws a couple daggers to poke them down and engages only like once. To me anyway, it would have made more sense for her to go in that direction, someone who progressively and continuously gets stronger over the course of a fight, and has to be taken down immediately lest they become too overwhelming to deal with. Naafiri's a Darkin champion, but doesn't give that same rampaging experience that the other ones do. Even Vars, who got retconned to be like half Darkin, half human or something, I forget the exact lore, has a passive that straight up makes him stronger upon scoring a takedown. I guess nowadays people play him more like a poke mage too, but he can afford to hide behind the whole he's only half dark and split between two different playstyles thing, whereas Naafiri is a full or they should just rework her, which is the direction I would take her. I feel like her current design fails to really perform either as an assassin or a diver. It's too simple of a kit that compromises on option select in the process. But what do you guys think? Do you believe Naafiri has something going for her that I haven't mentioned? I welcome you to share in the comments down below. That's gonna be it for today, so if you enjoyed the video, it would be great if you gave it a like and subscribed. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Why No One Plays episodes if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.